Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing a video talking to you about this fun little guy I got here, and this is a CETME Model L as produced by Mar. Now, this is not going to be a full in-depth review. One of those will be coming in the future. This is going to be more of a making you aware of this rifle, letting you know kind of what it is and what I think of it in general, at least my first impressions, so that if you're interested, you can try to get a hold of one of these before we don't see them again anytime soon. Again, this is going to be just a little bit of a first impressions after a few hundred rounds. I will be doing a lot more testing, but because my testing tends to take a while, especially with guns like this, I just again wanted to let you guys know about it again before we miss an opportunity here. So this one specifically is not mine. This one was actually purchased by a friend of mine, and he very graciously allowed me to do some filming with it. I will be buying one. I have one on layaway at the store that I work at. That's going to be very similar with one major difference that'll be going over later. But again, I just wanted to make you guys aware of these really neat rifles. If you're anything like me, you have a passion for old service rifles, I think that this will be a really interesting one for you. So, a little bit of background. I'm not going to go super deep into the history of the CETME Model Ls. That is something that has been very well done already by people like Ian over at Forgotten Weapons. He does a video specifically about the CETME L in general and its history. He also does a really good video comparing this to one of the other manufacturers of CETME Ls out there. If you're interested in getting a CETME L, I would heavily encourage you to watch that video just so you can get an idea of why you might want to pick Mar or one of the other manufacturers out there. So in a nutshell though, I'm going to say that this was a Spanish service rifle chambered in 223 or 5.56. To be honest with you, I'm not sure. I'm assuming it was 5.56 because it was NATO that dictated it, but the Spanish had been using the CETME Model C, which is, you know, what, very similar to the the HK91 or G3. A lot of people in the United States have them as C308s, which are Century Arms produced guns made off of CETME C kits. But the Spanish were basically told by NATO, you guys need to adopt 5.56, and so they came up with the CETME Model C. Again, if you want to know more about that, watch the Forgotten Weapons video. But obviously the Spanish didn't use these for too terribly long before adopting something a little bit more modern, at least as far as their main issue rifle. But that has made the parts kits widely available for import into the United States. And then you have companies like Mar who are able to produce these wonderful little rifles for our consumption here. So let's go over the features of this rifle and what kind of makes this thing a little bit more unique, starting at the front up here. So we have our original Spanish flash hider. So one cool thing is that due to 922 ARC compliance, Mar is having to use a certain amount of US made parts, and so they have found a way to basically clone a lot of the original Spanish parts so that they can use parts like the original flash hiders as part of the original Spanish parts. But one thing they do is they completely refinish all the parts. So you're getting, you know, full corrosion resistance. You're not getting a ton of worn parts like I did in my C308, which is perfectly serviceable, but, you know, lacks a little bit of that fit and finish that you would expect in a newly purchased firearm. So again, we got our 3-prong flash hider up here in the front, and I have to say it is surprisingly effective. I did some shooting with this in lower light, and it did a really good job of hiding the flash, at least compared to, you know, muzzle brakes or anything else like that. Moving back, we do have this ring just in front of our front sight block. This is usable for mounting the CETME style bipods, so you can have the little clamp-on bipods that would work. It's the same bipod as you would use with the CETME Model C. Just kind of a neat little option you have there, and kind of a holdover from the service rifles of Spain's past. We do have a sling loop up here on the front. Now, this is going to be designed for the original CETME slings. However, those of you who are who have enough ingenuity can probably figure out a way to make a more modern sling work on that if you wanted. Now, one of the cool things with the CETMEs is the bayonet mounting position is actually above the barrel, so you can get the CETME bayonets that'll just clip onto the front of the sight block there. So a little bit of a different looking bayonet than we might be used to, but pretty cool nonetheless. Now, I don't know how true this is to the original CETMEs, but the front sight post itself seems very M16-esque. I would imagine it's probably cross-compatible with regular M4 or AR-15 front sight posts. I don't know that for sure, but it does look awfully similar and works perfectly well. Moving back, we have our front charging handle. Now, one of the big departures from this to like the CETME C or any of the other HK91 guns is there's no locking notch. So this is a roller delay blowback, in case I haven't said that yet. And typically with those guns, there's going to be a locking notch, so you can pull the charging handle back, lock it in the rear position, and then do your mag changes, clear malfunctions, do whatever you need to do, and then you can smack that thing forward. This one does not have that locking position in the rear. However, there is a way to lock it back, as we'll get to in a second, just a little bit less intuitive. So typically, if you're going to be doing reloads, you're going to be doing it with the bolt closed because this doesn't have a last shot hold open. And again, there's no way to lock it back easily or expediently. So we have newly manufactured furniture up here with the handguard, the stock, and pistol grip and all that by Marcolmar here in the United States. Ergonomically, this thing is again going to be a little bit different in that you have a magazine release button that is way far forward. Even with my little Whopper Junior hands, I can get a hold of that though, so not a deal breaker there. And one cool thing as a departure from the HK style stuff is this uses regular Stanag magazines. So it comes with a regular aluminum GI style AR mag. However, I did do some testing with this with a Lancer mag, and the Lancer mags fit in just fine, and they do function just fine as well. So that was a really cool thing to find out. You're not stuck with just, you know, some weird surplus mag you're not going to find anywhere. This is usable with your regularly available GI mags. Now, it will not feed with PMags. I have not been able to get a PMag to lock in. If that's a deal breaker, then I guess that's a deal breaker, but not that big of a deal for me. One of the weird quirks about this rifle is the ejection port here. You do have a little flare that acts as a shell deflector, and it does do a pretty good job of kicking that brass kind of down and away from you. So even if you're left-handed, you should probably be able to run this thing just fine. And in fact, talking to one of my coworkers, he actually finds the ergonomics a little bit easier to run left-handed, but that's going to be a subjective thing. But it's just kind of a weird thing I didn't notice right away until my coworker pointed out to me. The ejection port is actually too short to fit a live cartridge. It's really designed for a fired cartridge, as an ejection port would, but that has led to some interesting situations that we'll probably be going more in depth into in the full review, but just something interesting to point out. Now, the rear sight block here is very noticeable, I guess. It's a different appearance than we're typically used to here in the West with our modern guns, but it is functional. So you have a flip adjustable L sight back here, which is elevation adjusted for a 200 yard and 400 yard aperture. The size of the aperture seems to me to be the same size. It's just a matter of elevation adjustment for long distance or close distance shooting. Again, I'll probably go into my feelings a little bit more about that when I do my full review, but I could stand for a little bit of a bigger aperture. But as I alluded to earlier, there is a way to lock the bolt back on the rear sight base here. So there's a lever on the right side of the gun. If I pull the bolt back and push that in, so push in here as I pull the bolt back, it will lock the bolt open. And then there is a button on this side that will then stick out that you can use to drop the bolt. It's a little sticky on this one. The other ones that I've handled at the store I work at do release it just fine, but just something interesting there. Now, the safety is going to be very familiar to anyone HK, initiated. So people with again, C308s, HK91s, MP5s, anything like that. It's a safety you're going to be used to, not the most ergonomic thing in the world, but it is perfectly serviceable. And again, just like those other guns, trigger's not anything to write home about, but again, perfectly serviceable. Again, the stock back here is a US produced part, but you do have the original style sling mount back here, so you can run your regular CETME slings if you wanted to, or again, you do have modern options available that can be very easily adapted to work with this gun. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about what comes in the box from Mar. So if we open this up here and move this guy out of the way, you'll see that this would normally have the Duramag in there, but we went ahead and pulled it out, and it's got a nice slot there for an extra one. And you have the gun, you have a really nice manual that goes over, it feels like a very traditional military style manual that you would expect, except in this case it's in English as opposed to en español, which is más fácil para nosotros de los Estados Unidos. You also get a nice little touch of some Slip 2000. If you guys have been watching my channel since the very beginning, you'll know that I did a very early video on the Sub 2000. You also get your other standard lock stuff. You've got the little, if we can get it out here, basically a little warranty card, as far as I can tell at least. I can't say I've ever used one of those. And then just some important information regarding ammunition. Because of the operating system, they want you to basically be using NATO spec ammo. And then of course the gun itself, but you guys have already seen that at this point, so it's not going to be anything too new, but just a really gorgeous rifle, in my opinion. But you know, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So let's go ahead and do some more shooting with this thing. Now, one of the cool things that Mar is doing is they're not just doing this kind of original configuration. They do have some different color combinations as well. And again, I'm not an expert on Spanish military arms, but I would imagine that the kind of black on gray was not an original option, but it looks actually really good. We have one of those in the store that I work at right now, and I was really tempted to drop the one I have on layaway off and go with that one instead, but I kind of like the original OD green. I'm a sucker for green. A lot of my guns are green when I can get them that way, so can't complain too much there. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a major difference between this one and the one I will be getting, and that is mine has a welded on Picatinny rail up here on top, which will allow easier optics mounting. So this makes it a little bit more practical for modern usage. Not maybe perfectly original to how it would have come if you were in the Spanish military, but a cool option nonetheless. Now, they do also have kind of short-barreled rifle versions of these. So I believe it's the LC, where the barrel pretty much ends right after this little clamp here, and then it has like a PDW style collapsible HK style stock. The only thing with those is they are significantly more expensive. They do look really cool though, and granted, you know, being a factory SBR, you are paying quite a bit for tax stamp as well. However, as I've demonstrated before, I am not immune to wanting impractical SBRs with my Beretta ARX 100, which I'll be talking a lot more here in the very near future. But I just dig stuff like that. And the cool thing too is with the SBR versions of these, it's a 12.5-inch barrel, which is like a really good short barrel length for 5.56. So they do have other options out there, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So no matter what your flavor is, there's options there. So now that we've kind of done a brief overview of the rifle, let's go ahead and talk about what my experience has been with this thing as far as reliability and all that kind of stuff. So far, like I said, this is going to be more of a first impressions thing. I've only put about 200 rounds through this gun, and I did have one malfunction in that period of time. In the first 40 rounds or so, I did have a stovepipe. Now, I was honestly expecting a little bit of a break-in with this thing just because it is a little bit of a different operating system, and you know, just it's kind of, I guess, par for the course with some of these older designs. And again, I did have that one stovepipe, which you'll probably have seen at this point. But since then, it's been 100% now. Again, that's not an exhaustive test by any stretch of the imagination. And when I do have my own, I will be putting 4 more rounds through it to be able to have a more informed opinion on that. But again, so far it's been running really well, and this is a very pleasant gun to shoot. So if you haven't shot a roller delayed blowback gun in general, they're known for having a very smooth recoil impulse, and this is no exception to that. It really smooths the recoil impulse out nicely, matching that with a cartridge like 223 or 556, which already has a pretty light recoil impulse. It's just a very pleasant gun to shoot. You can really just keep this thing locked down on target and burn through ammo pretty quick, and it's just again, stays on target. Not a whole lot to complain about. Is it ever going to replace an AR-15 for me? No. Ergonomically, it's kind of funky. Weight-wise, it's a little heavy. Optic mounting options and other accessory mounting options is a little bit weird. But if you're like me and you just have a soft spot in your heart for old service rifles, I do think that this is one that's worth adding to your collection, which again is why I want to do this kind of first impressions video, so that if you're like me and you dig stuff like this, you will have an opportunity to pick one of these up, because I don't know how long these things are going to be available. Stuff like this usually kind of pops up and disappears from the market, and sometimes reappears, sometimes doesn't. So again, if you're into stuff like this, I wanted to make you aware before we lose the opportunity to get them, because again, my full review on something like this is probably going to take a while. So big thing here is, because of my limited experience, I'm going to have to defer to a lot of you guys. If you have experience with CETME Model Cs, especially ones from Mar, or possibly even better, ones not from them, let me know what your experience has been. I know there's also a lot of kits, so a lot of people are probably building their own. Big thing to keep in mind there, though, is even if the kits are like 350 bucks, you got to buy a receiver, you got to buy a barrel, you got to buy the jigs, you got to do all this stuff. You're going to end up spending about the same as you would on a factory-produced gun, except this carries warranty and the one you build in your garage is not. So if I have issues with one, I can send it back to Mar. If I build one in my garage and it doesn't work, I get to just keep tinkering with it. So I guess you can kind of decide what you want to do there. But again, if you have experience, please let me know. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, let me know about that as well. I want to say thanks to my buddy Bear for letting me play around with this one in the meantime until I can get my own. He's a really good dude, and he really hooked it up on this one. So I want to say thanks to him. Also want to say thanks to my patrons for making videos like these ones possible. Ammo, especially 556 and 223, is not super available right now. So with the contributions I get over there, really helps justify the expense and investment in those things. So because of that, I do post all my content over there early. We do some exclusive content. Basically, we do a lot of stuff over there. So if any of that stuff sounds interesting, or you just want to financially support the channel, definitely check out my link to Patreon down in the comment section, or excuse me, in the description. But anyway, with all that being said, as always, I hope you got something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching.